I want to say congratulations. We did have a great full-on SWAT exercise a few months ago that went very well, and that's MARTA is a high-value target, for lack of a better term. It's a concentration of people, and it's a target that's easy to put on folks. But I just want to talk about one is the national championship game. If we want to attract Amazon, if we want to attract more business, we've got the Super Bowl next year, and from what I understand, drilling down into that, this was not an electrical failure. This is not an IT failure. It was a failure of people to show up to work, and this is a big issue. Actually, Chief, I'd love to go through the matrix with you, but I think y'all are doing a great job on the security side. We still have our perpetual riders and our eaters, and and my friends that I see every day. But on that side, I don't think we need to drill down into the weeds on statistics. I mean, it's safer. The officers are pushed out there. They're visible. They ride with respect. I think, and just correct me if I'm wrong. We've had zero civil rights complaints on that over the past few years on that. So, and we're excluding people from the system that are what I'll call the problem, the children, or we can't get out of a Martoc meeting without saying the word knucklehead at least once. But with that, this is probably going to depart from the agenda a little bit, but just want to, Ms. O'Neill, if you want to come up and just talk about this. And let me get you.
So good afternoon, Chairman Taylor and members of the committee.
Give me 1 second, Liz.
Okay.
And like I said, we want to. It's rather late in the day. A lot of us have been, I don't need to go through this slide by slide. And I think, like I said, the public safety side of it, I'm very comfortable with. But we do have some operational issues. And as we move forward with pursuing some of this, I just want to have you address that.
Certainly. So I'm Elizabeth O'Neill. I'm the interim general manager, CEO at MARTA. My day job is really chief counsel at MARTA. And to address some of the concerns that you've raised specifically, Chairman Taylor, we will not go through the entire presentation, but I do have our Chief Operating Officer, Rich Krisak, who will go through the specifics of what occurred after the College National Football Championship, as well as, and I don't believe that he has been introduced to the committee before, Rob Troop is also our Deputy General Manager, so he will address or some of the concerns or the ways that we're going to address some of the concerns going forward, which, as you said, we were going to be preparing for the Super Bowl. And then I know, Chief, you have said that you don't need to go through her entire presentation. She might just get up and touch on, again, her experience in being up in Minneapolis for that Super Bowl, some of the lessons learned, and how we might implement them come next year. So I would like Mr. Krisak initially to come up and just give an overview of that College National Football Championship.
Roger that. Mr. Krisak.
So good afternoon. My name again is Rich Krisak. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for MARTA. And I'd like to go through a couple of issues here that occurred during the National Championship game to kind of give you a background of what occurred. And again, Rob will talk about how we're going to improve things going forward. So MARTA prides itself in doing a good job for special events. We host, of course, a lot of special events in this city because of the venues we have, like the Georgia World Congress Center, Falcons, Atlanta United, so we're very adept at doing this. Back in 2008, we created a large-scale special event planning SOP. We have been consistent in using that going forward. We meet on a weekly basis looking at special events a month ahead of time, and based on the projected ridership of that event, we decide whether we trigger our large-scale event planning SOP or not. Obviously, the national championship game triggered that SOP. We can go here. This kind of slide kind of capsulizes what we do with our large-scale SOP event, and it really requires most of the departments within the agency to meet at least 4 times in advance of the event. We do staffing plans, we identify a deployment of resources, we develop a operating plan, and we basically put all that together into a large book, or now we do it electronically, that describes in detail how we're going to manage that plan. So we did do that for the national championship game. Now it's important to note that since Mercedes-Benz Stadium has been open, we have run 30 events successfully at 96.5% on-time performance, including the SEC game, Falcons games, and Atlanta United games. So we have been doing a very good job, and there are conditions that occurred during the championship game that really kind of threw us off the mark, and those are the things we want to talk about. I know this slide is kind of hard to see. When we do special events, we do projections. So we have staff that works with the venue provider, whether that's a sporting event, something at the World Congress Center, and we make an estimate with that venue provider with the ridership that we anticipate we're going to receive on the MARTA transit system. So for the national championship game, we were anticipating about 15,000 people. We actually carried 22,000 people, so we had about a 50% increase. It was kind of a special day for us because, as you remember, there was an inclement weather day. State offices were out, schools were out. So we actually carried about 100,000 more than a typical weekday just on the rail system. So we got much larger than anticipated crowds. But we moved those people quite successfully, and it worked well for us. So we developed a service plan. Service plan worked, carried close to 400,000 people. So what happened at the game? The Mercedes-Benz Stadium and the Dome, in terms of transit access and transit use, has changed the paradigm for MARTA considerably. The access in and out of both facilities has changed dramatically from the Dome to the Mercedes-Benz station. So what are those differences? The differences are basically in terms of the access to the facility and the egress from the facility. So the old Dome, only about 25% or so of the ridership exiting the Dome was focused towards Vine City. The new Mercedes-Benz Stadium has increased that to about 40% of folks coming out to Vine City. Now, why is that an issue? Because Vine City is actually the smallest station we have in MARTA next to Bankhead. It was designed as a neighborhood station. It was not designed to be integral to serving a sports facility. So that has caused some issues to us. The other thing we lost with the Dome was we had a direct bridge connection from the Dome parking garage right into our station. That gave us a natural way to meter folks onto the platform at the Dome. We lost that capability when the new stadium was built. The bridge is still there, but it's not connected at this point. That forces a lot of people to come into the Phillips entrance, which did not used to be a major player in a sporting event at the Dome. So those logistics have changed. Now, we went ahead and we met well in advance of the first event that ever occurred at Mercedes-Benz Stadium with the Georgia World Congress Center, Atlanta Police, MARTA Police, the Falcons themselves, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And we developed a plan to accommodate the new realities of the characteristics of the facility we were going to serve. That held up really well for us for 30 events. Falcons games, Atlanta United games, SEC, we did quite well. What was the difference on the night of the 8th? It was kind of a perfect storm for us. So we had local teams, we had an overtime game, we had a lot of first-time riders that weren't used to using the system, didn't know how to utilize it, and that really caused a lot of issues for us. So if you look at this diagram, generally what it shows you is we're transporting people from Vine City, the Dome, to 5 points where you can transfer to the north-south, or you can stay on and continue east-west. So we run a series of shuttle trains basically from Vine City to just past 5 points to increase that capacity. And then we amp up the service on all of our branches. We actually had a capacity to carry about 15,000 people for the hour and a half that we actually served the game as folks exited. So 15,000 people in each direction, north, south, east, west, were out there. Trains were out there ready to go. So we had a service plane that could handle the crowd. What happened is we had some delays on the north line, and we failed to manage the flow of people coming from the Dome and Vine City into 5 points. And we basically just overloaded 5 points. So we had 3 teams. We had a team at Vine City, team at the Dome, A team had 5 points, but unfortunately, they weren't communicating with each other. Now, up to this point, it hasn't been a large problem for us. We've been able to handle crowds of this size without having that much coordination between those 3 teams. But unfortunately, you know, we kind of hit the brick wall in this one. We kind of found out where the resistance point is here in terms of handling crowds and managing our logistics and communications. So essentially, that's what happened. We overcrowded the station. We failed to control the crowds. That was further exacerbated by, you can see the slides up here, by you know, massive crowds. When we overcrowd the trains, we have door issues with the trains because people are bumping them, pushing them, holding them open. That made the situation worse for us in terms of managing it. And we had several people who pulled that emergency release you see there in the bottom left picture. So when we troubleshoot a train, we try to get the train going again. If you pull that emergency release, the train cannot move. It's a safety device. So they just all kind of built up with us and caused, you know, serious problems. The first half hour took us about an hour and a half to clear the event. We can normally clear 15 to 17,000 people from a Falcons game in about 50 minutes. This took about an hour and a half with 22,000 people. So, you know, I think overall we've learned a lot from the lesson. We understand what the root causes are, and we look forward to being able to implement new procedures to control the situation at 5 points.
So I guess my question goes back to the absenteeism. How much of a factor was that?
Yeah, the absenteeism that we refer to is really with volunteers. As far as the represented employees, the union employees, the management staff, they were there. In order for us to handle large-scale events, we don't have enough staff between our represented union employees and the management staff, so we rely on volunteers. So we have people who sign up and they volunteer for a shift at a station, primarily to help with information, how to use the fare collection system, what's the schedule, those kind of things. Unfortunately, a lot of those people didn't show up. I think part of it was the fact that it was an emergency day. You know, there was concern about inclement weather that may have deterred them. It was a late evening event on a weekday. We had a lot of rain prior to the game as well, so I think they may have deterred some of that. What we're looking at, and Rob will talk about, Mr. Tripp will talk about, what we're going to put in place to kind of change that volunteer nature of the support we have to have in an event.
Okay. Questions from the committee to Mr. Krisak? We'll get him up here. Senator Butler.
For what reason were people pulling the emergency lever?
You know, I think for some reason I've noticed over the past couple of years, people in frustration for some reason will start to use that device. We're looking at ways to secure that device and sign that device to make it, and to seal that device so that it's less apt that you're going to actually activate the device. In a lot of cities, you know, that's a pretty large fine for operating an emergency device on a public conveyance. Unfortunately, that's not posted here, so we're doing our research with the ordinances, looking at how to sign it better, how to seal it so people don't use it as much. We've had actually 17 occurrences recently of people using this in the past 3 or 4 weeks. So it's something that's a problem. We got to control it. We have a task force that's looking at it, made up of legal, rail car maintenance, and the police to learn how to better control that.
I was going to ask you if it was easier or harder to get people out, but I think you've already answered that by describing the limitations you have between the dome and the Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
It's been a challenge to serve the new facility. I think that natural metering device we had of the bridge coming out of the parking garage really helped us. Now, there will be a new bridge across Northside Drive that connects Vine City, but that won't increase the capacity of Vine City, but it gives us a way to meter people to get to Vine City. Once we get you on the stairway, once we get you on the ramp, we can kind of meter people into the station. So we think that will help overall, but it won't increase the capacity of Vine City.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the size of this event. You say that you've done 30 events at the new stadium, 96.5% on time, but this was a larger event. Have you done any other events there that had these 22,000 people?
This was the largest event so far the Mercedes-Benz Stadium has had. We've had ones that are a couple thousand passengers close to this, but we weren't anticipating this crowd. The other thing is, again, you know, Falcons riders are regular riders. So they purchase their round-trip tickets, how to get in and out of the facility and access it. Believe it or not, we had people queuing up trying to buy tickets as they were leaving the event. which really jammed up the station. So, you know, some of this, we know we're going to get this for the Super Bowl, so some of
Right.
this is going to have to be an educational process.
Yeah, give me 1 second there. That's for the. It's like the old rabbit ears. You just put the tinfoil on them and you can watch the game now. Gentlemen. Abby, do, okay. Actually, do you mind pulling the laptop down just, it might be, I'm not sure what that is. Just move it around a little bit, or turn it off and turn it on, maybe? Sorry, folks.
It's not that.
Beth, is it yours that's open? I just turned yours on. So, actually, if you don't mind, there you go. I still got it. Actually, if we don't, just turn on one. I'll turn on one, and you can, if you don't mind speaking into there, just because we do have to get this on archives. So let's see if one works now. I'm sorry, I apologize. There we go.
Okay.
Beth,
Part of the problem seems like 22,000 people. How much of a problem was it was late at night? It was an overtime game.
Well, that was part of it as well. It was kind of that going back to the perfect storm. You know, it was you had two local teams. You had a late night game, and it was on a weekday as well. So as far as our staff went, they had already gone through pretty much a full weekday rush hour, and one that carried 100,000 more than we normally do in a weekday. So, I mean, that had something to do with it as far as the staff went, because they were getting fairly exhausted towards the end of the event. Our management staff had worked basically 10 straight days, 12, 14-hour days for 10 days straight, managing SEC events, New Year's Eve, all those kind of things. So there was some probably complacency and some folks who were kind of worn out, you know, that, and not having the volunteers come in put even extra pressure on the people who were there to manage the event. So that was definitely something we have to look to a solution in the future where we may make it mandatory for you to come in on that day rather than volunteer.
For your volunteer employees, but not for the represented union employees you were referring
They
to.
got to be here, so
Right.
they don't have a choice.
So you're confident the next time there's a 22,000 person event late at night with all new riders that this won't be a problem again?
I think we'll probably have some issues here and there, but I think overall, if you look at the east-west line, ran flawlessly. The trains running across east-west had no issues whatsoever. All the issues were really focused on the north line. We had 2 medical emergencies, which is kind of out of control, so we had to actually stop trains, get the EMS to come take people off trains. And then we had 3 cars that had some door issues because of the overloading. Once those cars we troubleshot those cars stayed in service the rest of the evening and went in service the next day. So there wasn't a mechanical failure. It was just kind of like getting a trouble light on your dashboard. If your doors are open, sometimes just cycling the doors back and forth. That's typically what happens, that they cycle the doors. They may have to cut one in and out or so, and the train goes on its way. So.
Okay, thank you.
So just one question before I get to Representative Glanton. So we talked about the emergency, whatever, what I'll call the panic button or whatever you want to call that. We're rapidly running through a session right here, and to Ms. O'Neill, is that a legislative fix or is that just a regulation fix on MARTA that we need to do?
So what we are looking at now is, I think as Rich mentioned, looking at signage to really educate our patrons about, what that is and the ramifications of doing that. And at this point in time, not necessarily looking at a legislative fix this year.
Okay.
If it continues to be a problem, then we might come back to you.
Yeah, and it's like the aircraft door, don't open this while you're at 35,000 feet type thing, okay. But signage or education, okay. Representative Glanton.
Yeah, thank you. Just for my information, you talked about community stations, overcrowding Vine City and Phillips. Is there any future plans for expanding those? Is it necessary? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, unfortunately for Vine City, there's no immediate plans to increase any capacity of Vine City. We're going to have to try to do that by queuing folks better, controlling them better signage, those kind of things. It would be a major capital program for us to try to expand that station. The other thing, I don't, if you noticed in the paper, but Mercedes-Benz Stadium and Arthur Blank are actually talking about increasing exiting capacity because they realize themselves that they had a problem as well, not just with our riders coming out of the station, but the general public exiting the station. They were queued up for a very long time trying to get out of that stadium. So I think there's some realization now with larger crowds that maybe that capacity overall has got to be increased.
Thank you.
Senator Williams.
Am I on?
Yes.
A couple of questions. You answered the question around the expansion of the Vine City Station. I live in Vine City, so this is very near and dear to me. But could you tell me the makeup of the composition of the large-scale task force? You told us a couple
Sure,
of...
would include, it includes police, finance, planning, safety, operations.
Could you send us a list of that,
Sure,
of the
absolutely.
composition?
Yeah, so it's very comprehensive.
Okay, and then the other thing, the bridge from the stadium to the Vine City MARTA station, is that a MARTA project?
No, that's a city project. It's actually under construction right now. So we do think that'll help us so much, but more from metering the crowd rather than actually increasing the capacity of the station. We think that will be a benefit. The other thing we like to explore is if you've ever ridden, for instance, on July 4th when we have the Peachtree Road Race, we run alternative bus service at the same time we're running train service. So you can take a train and actually get up to Limburg, or a bus and actually get up to Limburg, or you can take a train to get up to Limburg. And that kind of helps us with the overflow. Right now, the state basically shuts Northside Drive down. I think that's actually a state highway. It's not under control of the city. But we really need to work collaboratively to be able to provide. We did provide some alternative bus service that night. We actually ran buses to West End Station as an experiment. That actually worked very well for us. But we want to be able to move folks even further away than just West End Station, maybe go up to Limburg or go further south to kind of alleviate overcrowding.
Thank you.
So if you could direct that to Zenaida, the committee aide, she can get that
Okay.
out to the committee. Thank you, Senator. Okay, good.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. And I apologize about the podium mic. There's just some sort of gremlins in the system there.
No problem. My name is Rob Troop. I'm the Deputy General Manager for MARTA. And what I've been tasked to do is to set up a task force to look at our large-scale event planning, how we approach it, being able to look at best practices from other transit agencies. And the positive takeaway from what Mr. Kresak had talked about is that we did a really deep dive into this. We found a lot of information. We found out a lot of information where we could have done things a lot better, where we could have done things a little bit different. So part of what we need to really look at is, again, the metering the crowds, but, what do we do with that information? As you know, information and intelligence that you get from the field is absolutely key to be able to react to these things, and that goes into our Emergency Operations Command Center, how that is set up, the type of information that's coming up there, the type of technology that we have interfaced with the field, again, with the volunteers, looking at different ways, again, best practices from other transit agencies, what do they bring into it, and additionally, what do we do beforehand? How are we educating the riders who aren't normally educated on this? How do we make sure that they have fares and they're not at the ticket vending machines? You take a best practice from a place like WMATA for the first Obama inauguration. They carried about 1.2 million passengers on their system. Normally they carry 700,000. One thing that they had was they had commemorative cards, fare cards. It was an incentive for people to buy that. We would probably look at doing something similar to that for the Super Bowl to be able to set up these commemorative cards. But again, education to make sure that people understand how to ride the system, know what they're doing, information and intelligence that we get from the field, and be able to react to that appropriately. I mean, very simple things like how is the room set up in the EOC? Is it set up to be able to allow that collaborative effort? And what type of to more complicated things like the type of technology that we have in there. Like I said, I'm very pleased with the intelligence that we have moving into this. The deep dives that operations has done to be able to give us a base and a framework to be able to work from.
Okay, so just I guess more of a sort of a question, but on the intelligence stuff at the EOC, do you guys, we've got Cyber Command setting up in Augusta right now. Have you guys worked with them at all on any of this?
Well, actually, and that's what I was going to talk to,
Okay.
what I was going to allow the chief to do. What we also did is
Okay.
we sent people out to the Super Bowl in Minneapolis, be able to understand how they were conducting the security and also the operations for that. And I will allow Chief to speak a little bit on that and the intelligence he's gathered from that.
Chief Dunham? And I want to say again, if the committee members, if you haven't gone to a full-on multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional exercise, you got to do that once every year. Was there till about 4 a.m, but and it's a very realistic scenario. I mean, they hire professional stuntmen and actors to actually come and really try to cause a problem for your folks, and you know, it's a good takeaway just as to how vulnerable any public transportation system can be to even a small number of people, but how you deal with it and lessons learned was very good stuff. So, Chief, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Wanda Dunham. I'm the chief of the Martoc Police Department for the last 12 years. I want to welcome the new Martoc members and say hello to the returning Martoc members. So thank you for allowing us to be here today. We wanted to, I know Representative Taylor talked about the Ride with Respect, but I just want to update the numbers. We've had a lot of success with the Ride with Respect program. Since November of 2013, we have suspended 13,000 folks who have been unruly and on our system. And so if there were loud music or if they've just been disorderly, knucklehead behavior, as our former general manager called it. So we have had 13,449 total suspensions. 6,000 of those have been fare evasion. People, for some reason, think that MARTA is free, and we have to reiterate it's not. We've only had 960 appeals and 947 repeat offenders. And so just want to, I know we want to talk about stats, but just want to reiterate that we're still on the job. We're still working. We're still, this is just from July 1st of this year, 2,259 folks were suspended, fare evasion leading the way, but we have been actively pursuing fare evasion and all of these other disorderly conduct acts and to keep MARTA safe. And so just want to let you know, just give you an update really briefly. So the Super Bowl is coming. And so I did have an opportunity to go out to Minnesota to talk with the transit professionals, to talk to the other law enforcement agencies about Super Bowl 53 that will be here February 3rd of 2019. The Super Bowl is a 10-day operational period. It used to be on Sundays. You get your chip and dip, and you just sit back and watch. That's me. So I'll get my chip and dip. But we would sit back and it's on Sunday. Now it's 10 full days of packed full of opportunities for folks to go out, enjoy the Super Bowl experience, even for the folks who don't have tickets, because the tickets are anywhere from $2,500 into things like the amounts I can't even afford. So it's anywhere from $25,000. So we wanted to make sure that we were prepared. Not only the police department went out, we also took rail operations because we had our issue, and we wanted to see best practices to see how they handle that. They were expecting 20,000 riders, so similar to what we had. So they had 20,000 riders, and they wanted to make sure that we wanted to make sure that we were learning from them. Some best practices: start early, and we're doing that. Committees. So they said you have to set up committees. You have to make sure our deputy general manager will be talking about the task force that he talked about. And so it'll have all the major players that we need to make sure that everybody needs to be at the table. This is not just a police event. This is not just a rail event. We have to have all players on deck. Our employees, one thing that Minnesota did, they didn't make it voluntary. They called them transit ambassadors, and this is your assignment for the day. And so wherever you are, wherever you were needed, that's where you were. So we're going to try to adopt that. Staffing, we have to address staffing. Do we have enough? I don't know if we have enough. Minnesota, they had 3,000 law enforcement officers. They didn't have enough. Minneapolis police has 800 law enforcement officers. But what did they do? they call their neighbors. They call the local jurisdictions. And so we have to reach out far and wide and think that we can handle this alone. We don't have to handle it alone. So I truly intend to call all of our local jurisdictions and ask them, hey, can you help us? You know, even if it's just to cover the parking lots while our officers are on the trains. We have MOUs with all of the local jurisdictions, and so we're going to ask them to come in and help us. One thing that Minneapolis also did was that they have 500 National Guard that come in. And, you know, use them. 50 of them were assigned to the transit. I intend to truly ask for 50 National Guard. We've already contacted TSA to ask if they would give us extra K-9. MARTA has 16 explosive detection K-9. We're going to ask for more. They've already agreed to that. We have asked our FAMs, which is the Federal Air Marshals, to come in and help us, the Viper teams. So we're going to ask for anything that we can, you know, we're not too proud to ask for assistance, and I think that's what it takes. It really does take a coordinated effort. Training. I just spoke with the head of the NFL security today, Kathy Lanier, and she has agreed to do free training, tabletops, and full-scale exercises that they will give us from the NFL, come down here and give us free training and do tabletops for free. And then I just obviously got off the phone also with Sonia Proctor from TSA, DHS. They're coming down to give a tabletop, a coordinated effort, not just for MARTA. We can't do it alone. We have to look out for, you know, include all of our neighboring, our partnering agencies. Technology. Is there something that's out there that that can help us do our jobs better? If it's a screening technology, is it video analytics? Is it something that we can use? So we're looking at technologies now that will help us. The media and marketing is so important. One thing that I learned is that I can survive in negative 26-degree windshield. I didn't think I could. I was layered up. I couldn't even, so I didn't know I could survive. But the reason I could survive, and you know, I was really happy when it got to be 4 degrees, but the reason I could survive in that weather is because the media, they told me every day, if you stay out there past 30 minutes, you will get hypothermia. I believe them. I was not out there past 30 minutes. But the media was so important. And even before we got to the Super Bowl, even before we got to Minnesota, they were constantly sending us messages about what to do, what to bring, how to ride transit. And so that's what we have to reach out far and wide, not just when they get here, but do a lot of pre-planning. And then, of course, the budget. It's expensive, and we're planning our budget now, and so we're trying to plan that. I don't know if we'll have enough money in our budget, but what happens is that we have to look and see what we need to do to try to plan for transit, extra trains, and we got to carry all of these folks. We got to put extra trains out there, kind of like the bridge collapse when we put extra trains out, but we also have to put extra security. If people don't feel safe, they're not going to ride. We know that. And so we need to make sure that they feel safe. When we were walking around Minnesota, every few feet there were police, K-9, or the National Guard. I felt completely safe. And that's what we wanted. We want our folks to feel safe here. We're coordinating with the city of Atlanta. We're having monthly meetings. I'm having bi-weekly meetings internally. We will be prepared for the security of it because we want people to feel safe and ride. That whole 10 days, it's going to be so many streets that are blocked off downtown that the only way to get around will be transit, and we want them to feel comfortable. Any questions?
So, and this is one you may or may not have the answer to. Georgia National Guard, or Air National Guard, or Army National Guard. Basically, what kind of assets they have as MPs? I mean, that you would be a natural fit from people who are local. That'd be easy to deploy. What kind of numbers? If you don't know, that's fine.
Oh, yeah, no, they had 500 they asked for, but we already have an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with the National Guard in case we have situations like this. So we already put that in place ahead of time. But, you know, they said that they'll give us whatever numbers that, you know, we need. And so we don't know what those needs are. We hope that Atlanta, you know, they'll probably ask for them. But I'm thinking, you know, we'll probably ask for 100 just to make sure that our stations are secure. I want to have somebody at every station.
Gotcha. That's and I'm sure, obviously, the state's going to cooperate with that, with hosting this event. So, Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, great presentation. Thank you for that. We talked about maybe last year or the year before, maybe a team going out to the Cyber Command and establishing relationships and getting some best practices. Were we able to do that? And if we were, did we establish the relationships that we need?
Yes, sir. We sent 3 teams, and they learned a lot. It was a really good exercise for our teams just to get away from the city and kind of go out and, just test all of the things that we've been doing. And it was a really good and value-added exercise. And so thank you. I think you mentioned that to us, and so we reached out to the team. So thank you for letting us know about that.
Well, thank you very much. And I guess we'll get into my next briefing. But thank you for your briefing.
Thank you, sir. And one thing, could I say happy birthday to Representative Tom Taylor? It's his birthday today.
I appreciate that. My son got put out of the will this morning. He said, "Dad, if older is wiser, you must be one smart son of a gun." And I said, "Okay." But thank you. And actually, for an event that, if you all want some entertainment on Thursday, we were having the House versus Senate fencing match in the Rotunda upon adjournment, and Representative Werkheiser and I will be fencing against 2 senators. I get Ligon, he gets Blake Tillery. So if you want some entertainment there, we're trying not to kill him. But who's number 4? Is that Representative Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious, Chief Dunham, with the amount of law enforcement agencies, is there a lead law enforcement agency that will be appointed to an event such as the Super Bowl, and how's that coordinated, and how does MARTA fit in there?
Yeah, so thank you. That's a great question. I was going to talk about that. So we had an opportunity to talk to the Minneapolis police, and the deputy chief was over that.
Actually, Chief, you can come back up to the mic, because we're actually archiving this, yeah.
Yes, thank you. That was a great question. So one thing that we saw when we were looking at the Minneapolis, we were observing, one thing that we saw was that it was 3,000 law enforcement officers from all over. So not only was it Minneapolis, it was St. Paul, it was Bloomington, and it was also sheriff's offices and sheriff's departments, because it took everybody. So we actually got a chance to observe a briefing. And he was up on the screen, and the deputy chief was calling out assignments. And I noticed he didn't say, such and such from DeKalb, or he didn't say this and this from Atlanta. He didn't say this from MARTA. He said, just called a name and gave an assignment, called a name and gave an assignment. And so we asked him, we said, how do you manage that many people? It's 3,000 people plus 500 National Guard. He said, we manage it as one department. That's the only way that you can manage it, is one department. And so what they did was, which was, I thought it worked really well, is that they assigned sectors. And so the city of Atlanta, if it were here, the city of Atlanta would assign, like I said, a lieutenant. And that lieutenant would be over that sector. After it was over, after he gave out all the assignments, the deputy chief, he said, okay, if you're in A sector, go over here. If you're in a B sector, go over here. And everybody met up with their sector leader, and then so that they would get to know each other's face, and then they all went out to their assignments. And he said it's the only way that you can do it. So how does that impact MARTA, which was your question? So we will be included in that, but we have to take care of MARTA, right? So we have to make sure that MARTA is secure. And so we'll coordinate with them, but our officers will stay on MARTA. Our K-9s will stay on MARTA. Our drug dogs will stay, we don't have drug dogs, but our bomb dogs will stay on MARTA, because we need to protect MARTA. And that's what Transit did, and that's what Minnesota did. Even though they were there, they were a part of the MAC, which is the Multi-Agency Command Center, which was so important, because they had someone from every walk of, from the hospital, from the hotels, from the NFL. So if something were to happen, they actually had a gas leak, and they had somebody from the gas company right there. So instead of saying, let me find a number to Atlanta Gas Light, they just said, oh, hey, what's going on? And they turned around, and the gas person was there. Mall of America, which is the largest mall. I never thought I'd get tired of shopping. Only on my off time, boss. But the Mall of America, is, they said that they have, they received some of the most terrorist threats of any other mall, of course, because of the symbolism of the Mall of America. 550 stores, they have their own security. They were at the MAC, and then they also had Transit that, because the transit goes straight to the mall, and they had somebody in every operation center there. So that's what we'll contribute. We will contribute a person to every command center. We'll send somebody like we do now to the Atlanta Operation Command Center. We'll send someone to the JIC, which is the Joint Information Center. We'll send someone to the MAC to make sure that we're getting timely and accurate information, and we're giving them information as well. So, so that's the only way to coordinate it. But, I think we have to make sure that we're talking. I mean, we have to make sure we're communicating, and don't get into silos and say, don't get territorial. You have to make sure that we're open to receive help and give help.
Lastly, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I've been here long enough to remember when the Ride with Respect program was implemented. I must say I was skeptical at that time. I'd love to hear how many people have got the ultimate punishment eliminated from ever being able to use MARTA again.
Wow. We don't have those numbers, but it's really not that many. I think the Ride with Respect program, I know we had some skeptics when it started. It didn't have enough teeth, but it really has been an effective program. Let me tell you why. Because remember, we told you then that if they don't come back to the attention of law enforcement, then it's a win. And, people are like, well, how would you know if they ride again? If they're riding with respect, and they don't come back to the attention of law enforcement, then it's a win for us. It's a win for our customers because they don't have to deal with the disorderly folks, or and it's good for us because they obviously paid to ride, hopefully. But they didn't come back to our attention. So, but it is a good program. And Liz, Liz didn't get a chance to talk about it, but we're getting ready to refresh it because it's been out there since 2013 now. So now we just need to just refresh. Get it back out there, get the visibility back out there, and what a great time to do that, especially since we all have all these visitors getting ready to come to our city.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Not that many. I can get you those numbers, though. I will.
So yeah, I mean, and this is obviously we've got some huge events and some opportunities with possibility of Amazon and things, and some of the disproportionate things that you see. I mean, I was in Japan when the Aum Shinrikyo thing took place, and it's one of those little disproportionate, small group of folks can cause a lot of problems, and being able to deal with that. Want to segue into now. Again, my experience, I ride MARTA every day. In the past few months, I've rarely had a train go on time, and when I hit 5 points, it's like the golden red lines are delayed, due to an issue at the airport or whatever. And consistency of service, and I think we want to go back to also I'm going to recognize Representative Glant here in a minute. The IT issues that we're talking about are these IT issues, and I'll just Mike being the expert on this, I'll go ahead and turn over the mic to him. The mic to Mike.
Chief O'Neill, we had an opportunity to talk to you before the meeting, and we talked to a couple of your staff, and I asked you to give us a brief just overview of the information security. Where are we at with it? Where are we at with the RFP? Where are we with, and how long from the RFP to getting it done and implementation? Could you share that with us?
So I think we had previously talked about that. As you know, we are continuing with that. We are also conducting a search for a new Chief Information Officer. Ming Si, who had been our CIO, left MARTA, and we are in the process. We have hired an external search firm that specializes in IT personnel and they're leading a search for a new CIO, but that has not stopped the progress that we have with the RFP. I don't have the exact dates for you. I can get that to you. Sorry, I wasn't aware that we were going to be talking about that today. But I can certainly get you that information. But it is proceeding, while we go through the search for a CIO.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So I guess again, what are we looking at as a time frame on this? But basically the RFP for the IT systems, because as we've seen with elections and other things going on, the cybersecurity realm right now is little bit scary. What's the time frame on that?
So I think the timeframe that we had provided to you all, we are still adhering to that. I would just have to get you those exact dates. I know this was the year where the RFP, was being issued as far as when the responses are due. I'll get that information back to you. We also do have a Chief Cybersecurity Officer at this point. It's working very closely to make sure that we're seeking, that everything that we're putting into that RFP and that we're looking for in that is going to be adequate to get the results that we're looking for as far as achieving the cybersecurity level that we need.
So I guess the time frame we talked about before was 18 to 24 months for the RFP process. Where are we on that timeline now? Because that seems like to me, that seems like an IT life cycle, not a
Right, so I
RFP
know we had
process.
moved up some of the deliverables and some of the dates. I can get you that information. I do not have it with me here today.
Okay. Beth, did you have a? Okay. Questions from the committee? From Ms. O'Neill? Going once, going twice? Anybody else from your
Nope,
shop?
thank you.
Rhonda, or anybody else from your shop?
No,
Any
I
talk?
think that, just to thank you once again for having the opportunity to update you on this. As Wanda mentioned, we are going to be refreshing our Ride with Respect program, so I think you all can expect to see a lot of media around that, and just think that people may have grown a little bit complacent, so just bringing that to the forefront again. And then if there are any other questions or issues you have, please let us know. We'll be happy
And
to
obviously,
address those.
as we move forward with the transit governance and funding issues, we're it's a moving target out there. We just had the meeting right before
Right.
this with that, seeing how this all comes together. We've got, with that particular piece of legislation, we've got a 13 county area with 11 operators, and trying to get that into some sort of integrated format, or, wherever that comes together. Where we can get some, what I'll say, economies of scale to where we can get that more of a seamless sort of operation.
Right.
At some point down the road, we're still obviously mixing the dough with that cake right now. But so again, I just from a personal standpoint, from an operational issue, like I said, I was in Tokyo in December, and they apologized for a train leaving 20 seconds early. I sat for about 7 or 8 minutes at Arts Center today with the doors open on the train, no explanation, no announcement or anything. And consistency, reliability, or lack thereof is what drives people on or off of the system. And I just want to make that comment. If anybody else has anything else from the committee?
Thank you all.
Thank you. And any, I will take, if we've got a couple of minutes here, I'll give it about 6 minutes because I've been here since 7 o'clock this morning. But any comments from the public? Any comments from the public? Any comments from anybody else in the audience? Going once, twice? We're adjourned.